Welcome, Alex, to the Power BI Community Times in South Florida. And thank you. I'm super excited with your visit today and bringing so much power to this group through this presentation about Power Query. When you're ready, take it away and tell us all about yourself.
Well, I have to first request that you make me a presenter or organizer. I can't share my screen yet.
Yes.
But I am so excited for this talk because Power Query is everywhere these days. And this is like one of my blistering sessions where I just tell you everything where it's showing up and hopefully some of the new capabilities and features where you have been like, oh my gosh, I missed that at some point. So really, this is one of my favorite sessions to do here. But let me go ahead and start with actually sharing my screen. So I will get my presentation ready. Presentation mode, awesome.
Oh, we should also share the link for the Austin Power BI presentation that you did. It was last week.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that one was so
amazing.
good. Yeah. And I'm hopefully just any user group that wants to kind of invite me back, hopefully you enjoyed the session, but I would be more than happy to deliver that one time and time again, just talking about custom functions within Power Query and then also documentation, just using terms that I don't traditionally see a lot of people in the community use. So how can I share some of this knowledge that people are like, well, how do I get started with M? How do I kind of move on to the next thing? I would absolutely love that. But today, I won't keep us too much into the M. It'll be a lot of maybe kind of UI jumping between different platforms. To me, the power of the platform is Power Query. So with that, let me go and introduce myself. My name is Alex Powers. I am a program manager here at Microsoft on the Power BI Customer Advisory team, just helping a lot of our largest strategic customers adopting Power BI at scale. So just what weird, crazy things are they wanting to do or accomplish? How can our technology help them do that? So absolutely love just having that visibility into all of the fun things people are up to. You always see me kind of available over on the social channels as well. So Twitter, LinkedIn, always feel free to post or tag me in a post. If you have a question, feel free there as well. But if it's a deep technical DAX question, I'm probably not going to be the best guy here for you. So I'll just let you know there. But with that, my professional background is through Excel. I attended kind of that dashboard day event, learning Power BI. That light bulb moment went off, and oh my gosh, I just thought that this could transform everything that I know or if I've ever done in Excel and reporting. Then that led me into Azure, and I tell everyone now here, I don't know what's next with obviously metaverse and all these other things. So some sort of cloud enlightenment, one with the machine. I have no idea whatever's after Azure, but I'm excited for it. To let you know, I'm not a robot, though. Personal interest, cats, professional wrestling, and data. I do love pineapple on my pizza. I always get a lot of flack for that. But hopefully, if you're a fan, a thumbs up. If not, I understand. And then it reminded me here, someone over on the socials, I only like extra crunchy peanut butter. I don't know, with everybody in these smooth peanut butters, it ain't me. I don't get it. Extra crunchy only. And then, of course, I just started in a dashboard in a day. Now I'm here. So hopefully everything you've seen me talk about today, this is purely just like education, curiosity, showing up to user groups, learning from others, sharing what I know. This is purely just from a spreadsheet to all the things we're about to cover here in this next 60 minutes. So talking about our session objectives. So over the next hour, what is the things we're going to do? We're going to be defining the problem, introducing the platform, demonstrating the technology, and then obviously painting the future. After everything I've showed you, where do I think that this could potentially go? What are some of your ideas of where you would like to see it go? Just a lot of things I want you to kind of keep in mind. So first and foremost, defining the problem. For today, we need to go faster through low code, high productivity applications. Every machine, everything is just producing data these days. How do we get our hands around it, wrangle all this information here with maybe people that aren't from a traditional technical background? Because a lot of this, we have the data, we just need to simply, integrate it into this next system. So data munging, transformation, pipelines, orchestration. How do we make these capabilities easier for people who are from this traditional technical IT background? Looking at the Microsoft Power Platform, really the foundation here is our data. So it is native connectivity options here just with our data connectors, maybe enriching it with AI Builder or even Dataverse, which I am just a huge fan of Dataverse these days. I don't know when it happened, how it happened, but I will scream it from the rooftops. And then, of course, if we don't have something that is supported, REST or OData API feeds. So then that way you could integrate these platforms that just don't have a kind of out of the box. Our platform, modern data-driven architecture, a lot of this is going to be just data sources, that ingestion, moving it into storage, kind of getting it ready then for analysis. And then, of course, at the very end here, with kind of that exploration and collaboration. How do we get our data to our end users for them to explore, collaborate, find those insights as quick as possible? At that point, we then move back to the very beginning. How do we capture more data? How do we find more insights? It is this continuous loop. So streaming, unstructured, blobs, Synapse Analytics, Dynamics, Customer Insights, Power BI, obviously a huge fan there, but it is this continuous cycle that we now need to start thinking about with our information. My tool of choice, I love Power Query. I love that it is this easy to use, engaging, I love that word too, a no-code user interface. So I don't need to know all these different platforms, capabilities. How do I connect that to a data lake storage Gen 2 versus a 1? How do I connect that to a DevOps board? I just know the Power Query experience. I point, here's my click, I move on to the next thing. That is why I absolutely love it. All these sources, there are just so many connectors being added all of the time. A lot of this too is our developer community. So they're out building custom connectors to their platforms. So if you think like a Denodo, kind of Dremio, those vendors are building their own connectors to enrich and empower their customers with Power BI. So I absolutely love that anyone anywhere can go build a connector and have it sourced to their customers just through that low-code interface. So with this, I'm taking you through this demo now. It's going to be blazing fast, so I always encourage everyone at any point in time, if there's something that jumps out to you and you're like, oh my gosh, that could solve something for me right now, please feel free to come off mute, ask a question, always be selfish with your time. Once again, I appreciate you've given me kind of this hour here to explore Power Query, so always feel free to just kind of interject if needed. But I don't know anything about databases. I don't know anything about all of this crazy SQL Server Management Studio. My company is using SQL database. I'm just going to click this here now. I have a server address that they provided me. I'll go ahead and drop this in here real quick. And then they told me that my database here was AdventureWorks LT. Cool. No drivers, no heavy IT software. Point, click, get data, Azure SQL, I'm up and running. Selecting multiple items now. They told me to just go out and aggregate a bunch of our old sales history, look at the primary and foreign key relationships, pull this information through. I don't know what any of that stuff means in terms of the relationships. So I have my table. I'd like to find any related table that's connected to it. Power Query instantly recognizes the primary and foreign keys. Here now, I want to move into just transforming some data. I don't need all this information. I want to actually just filter out some items. So here within my customer table, and I'll zoom in here, Control-Shift plus, Control-Shift minus if you're a hotkey fan on how to make it a little bit bigger. But company name, I see my data, I click on my caret, text filters contains, and then I'll do bike, and I'll do or contains bicycle. Yep. Okay. Whew. So yeah, I need a break. That was writing way too much SQL. So structured query language, I am beat. That was way too much, line after line after line. And I know what everyone here is now saying, Alex, you didn't do a single thing. All you did was point and click. You typed in some values here, and Power Query returned the result. Well, kind of. So what's happening behind the scenes here on the right-hand side are applied steps. If I right-click this now, we have this View Native Query option. So what Power Query has done, and I'll go and blow that up a little bit, it has intelligently taken my points and clicks and transformed this into a native SQL statement that can be recognized by that source system. So one connector, Azure SQL, let's say another connector could be an Oracle, it could be a Teradata, it could be an Azure Custo. I point, I click, Power Query is intelligent enough to write this query in that source system's native language. I don't need to go out and learn 500 different languages. I know the problem that I need to solve. I point, I click, I get it done. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Native query, but there's more information here. There's more things I need to wrangle. So at the very end here, I need to replace and get some of these values. So I'm just gonna do a simple right click, replace values. I would like to replace AdventureWorks and just kind of return it with a kind of a blank string there. Awesome. So I now have every salesperson's alias. Right click, replace values. It's written this nice subquery here for me. Once again, replace. It's taking these points and clicks, translating it into these SQL functions. I'm still moving. I'm still moving. This is incredible here. I don't have to learn SQL and kind of all these advanced skill sets to get my data. What I'd like to do though is kind of get from the email address here. I'm going to use some artificial intelligence. So at the very top here, the add column, I'm going to use this column from examples option. So this is AI that's going to recognize my pattern. And I really want to extract out the domain. So adventureworks.com. Very cool. So like a flash fill over in Excel, Power Query intelligently wrote this text.after delimiter after this kind of @ symbol. It's recognized that this is what I would like to extract. So I'll press domain, press OK. A little sluggish there. I wasn't sure what those dots were that were rolling across my screen. DBAs are starting to yell at me though. They're saying, Alex, why are you downloading hundreds of millions of records constantly every time you query or update this data set? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. If I right click over here, I've actually broken this query folding. So this view native query is now gone. I've taken that heavy lifting from the SQL Server. I've now moved it into this mashup engine of Power Query. And they're saying, this is unacceptable. You need to figure out how you can get this thing back folding and getting it into a performance state. All right, so right click, new query, other sources, blank query. And I'm going to type in this awesome thing here at the top, which is hash shared. Press that. I now have every function that is available within my Power Query function library here. So I keep hearing some patterns and things that I probably want to look for. So I'll look for text because that's what I'm doing. So I'll do a begins with. I'm going to say a text dot. Awesome. Have my different patterns, text end. If I click above this function, get the last 5 characters as an example. So at the very end, 5, it'll output the word. All right, this is pretty cool then. So AdventureWorks, 19 characters. If I apply that logic, let me see if this will work instead. So I'm going to jump back to my customers, text after delimiter. I don't need that. I want to update this to end. And here at the very end, I'm getting rid of this @ symbol, and I want to just look for this last 19. So done. It was fast. I pressed enter. It already returned the information. Right click, view native query. Here at the very end, write 19 characters. So I'm learning the language as I kind of go here with this Power Query, with this hash shared. My DVAs are happy. They're saying, Alex, you've graduated from Excel. We want you to take on some much larger projects, some much larger activities. We want to get Power BI into your hands. All right, this sounds incredible. All of my work though, is it transferable? Do I have to restart all over again here with all these points and clicks and transformations? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Left-hand side queries, copy, and the coolest trick here of them all, if I go to Power BI Desktop, I transform data, right click here, paste. My goodness, that is incredible. One language that now spans 2 applications. If I go to my customers, I have all my applied steps here on the right-hand side. Right click, view native query. I see everything that I was doing over in Excel now available over in Power BI Desktop. All right, there's an underlying language. I'm starting to learn it. I attend these user group communities. I listen every Saturday morning to guy in a cube. They keep talking to me about partitioning. I have no idea what this means. So I look through my handy kind of Power Query reference here. So I'll do that hash share it again. Convert this into a table. And then I want to look for this word partitioning. So where can I find partition? I really want to know what these people are talking about. Once again, I don't have this background. I'm just listening for these keywords. Table.partition. All right, so it's a function. Partitions the table into a list of groups, numbers of tables based on the value. All right, there's a lot here. I just want to know what I need to do. So my function has my arguments, my table, what column I would like to partition, and then the group says number. So I'd really like to partition here. I order header table. I'm going to do an FX. So I'm getting into language now here, if you don't mind. Table.partition. What column? I'd like to partition this order date here. And then how would I like to partition it? I'd like to say date.month. So for every month, partition that information. And then, oh, I missed it here, 12. There's 12 months in a year. Ooh, ooh. Awesome. Functional programming. I've taken the point and clicks. I've now turned it into this dynamic list, 12 different tables of my information partitioned based on order date. If I look down here, I have June, and all of the June information in that individual partition. Right click, it's not folding. I know that that's not a good thing. So what I would like to do then is table.combine this list of values. Cool. Combine my list of all these individual partitions. If I look back on my applied steps, right click, view native query. Wow. Look at all these subqueries. That's beautiful. All these union statements. For all my SQL fans in the room here, how much of this is giving you a panic attack? Seeing this table.partition and all of this information listed. My DBAs keep telling me, hey, Alex, you're doing something interesting here with Power Query. We can't really figure it out. We really like you to start looking into some diagnostics. Here within the Power BI desktop application, where unfortunately just not available today within Excel, the tools ribbon, we can do start diagnostics. And I'll go ahead and do a refresh of this preview. And then I will go ahead and hit stop diagnostics. Awesome. So we have all this information available, that partition information, my detailed information aggregated. So let me click on detailed here if you don't mind, and then we'll look for the SQL statement. So let's execute query, right click, X filters equals, have all these SQL statements now, select top 4096, go and do a quick contains. Some query after query after query after query, just all hitting that same SQL database. My goodness. You open up Data Studio here on another screen. I've got to look at this at least from the DBA perspective too. I'll do AdventureWorks. And let me log in with the right account. Moving fast, awesome. Cool. So I've got my tables here, and what I would like to do is go ahead and open up Profiler, so launch Profiler, and then we'll start a trace. So for those who are familiar with more of a SQL Server Profiler, just using this over here in Data Studio, which I actually like quite a bit. It's gotten really improved lately here. So refresh preview once again. Data Studio sees all of these mashup queries. here now. So if I was to expand out one of these, I see that individual SQL statement that has been submitted based on my partitions. So what is the modulo of 12 and 7? What is that, 5? So this would be like May, that is looking for all those May dates. All of these being sent to the SQL server. Wow. Let me pause here. How many people are looking at Profiler to kind of trace your mashup engine queries? Feel free to come off mute, drop it in the chat. Cecilia, feel free as well. Go ahead.
Use good old SP who is active, by the way, to find those quickly. I can throw the link in the chat for those who aren't familiar with it.
So thanks, Gina. Is anyone using Profiler today to trace some of your Power Query queries? Finding those durations, finding all of the SQL that's being generated and sent to the underlying system. Or is this maybe the first time you've kind of considered kind of looking at this diagnostic capability, validating against your source system, just here within Power BI Desktop? All right. There's still a lot of Power Queries. So I see this tool, this Data Studio. Really, though, I would like a much richer diagnostic opportunity and kind of experience for my development. So I'm going to start looking at kind of the Power BI service. So up here in Power BI, I can do new, I can do data flow, prep, clean, and transform my data. And I'm just going to define some new tables. And then I'm going to go ahead and sneak in here to Power Query. I'm just going to select a blank query, press next, and then I'll go ahead and delete it. I don't need to do anything because why? Because this is such a great, incredible language. All I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, right click, copy, and I'm going to come back up here into my browser, right click, paste. Oh, I can't do it. I have to Control V. That's the only reason. I don't know why, but I always laugh at that. Control V, pasting on all of my queries here now. And then I can go ahead and authenticate here in just one step. Get my data preview. Yes, it's going to be organizational. Cool. Get that connected real quick. Press connect, refresh all of my data. Expand. Sweet. So I now have all of my transformations, and then let me go ahead and disable that for the moment. All of the transformations. One new cool thing, maybe not recognized at first sight here, but these indicators on the right-hand side. So I'll go to kind of our customer table. Gray, meaning analysis on the step was inconclusive. Here, green means that all of these steps will be able to be folded. If I was to right click, it's now called view data source query as opposed to native query. But I don't have to check it out every time. I can look for this green icon. Right click, view data source query. I now see that SQL statement that was generated just from the points and clicks of Power Query, my replace statement, my write statement, all that information is still transferable up into the Power BI experience. This is cool. So that's one area here, these folding indicators. Sales order header. Well, this is kind of interesting now. Right-hand side, I've got green, step will be evaluated. Gray, if I recall here, this is that weird list that I'd kind of built out here. The last step though, red. Step will be evaluated outside the data source. All right, so I love Power Query, remember, but I checked against the source system. It did fold. It was valid. So these are indicators. These aren't always the truth. Check the source system. That would be my recommendations. But I absolutely love that I do not have to jump into the advanced editor or right click this every time with these visual indicators. So troubleshooting visual indicators. The DBAs, though, they've told me that this thing just needs some help. There's no way that they're going to let that go into production. And I keep asking why. Why can't this go forward? And they say that it's really, I should look at the query plan. Query plan, I don't know what that is. I don't see like a plan button. So right click here on this last step, view query plan. Expand this here now. I'm going to do the big reveal. I'm going to zoom all the way out. There we go. This one table with 12 different partitions has generated this entire query plan. Look at this thing. Database, value, native query, value query, native query, nested join, expanded, streaming, full scan, stream, full scan. All right, they've convinced me that it's probably not the best here to go forward with this power query and this crazy M statement that I've discovered. Pause here though. How many people today are using the query plan within Power Query online through the data flows to look at your query and maybe troubleshoot or find some performance bottlenecks? Or is this the first time that you're seeing it today, the query plan?
It's the first time for me, or the first time I remember it. Would we be able to do this if we have gateways set up for queries going against on-prem?
Yeah, you'd be able to see all that information. So all this is just through the query transformation steps. If I was to do an Excel spreadsheet, you'd be able to do the same, just to see how it's being executed against the kind of the mashup engine layer. So that's where like this streaming. Yep. Like some of this information, if I was to do view details, and of course it's just bogging down. See this one here, like a column naming or a column streaming step. You would see that through the transformation layer. So I would highly encourage you to take a look. The export, which is kind of interesting, but this will export, if you remember some of that Power BI desktop information, where it was kind of in that table format over here, it'll export a JSON representation of this data, and then whatever you would like to do with it. But it will not export kind of this visual kind of view of it. So keep that in mind. All right, so they've convinced me, get rid of these steps. They're way too dangerous. We don't trust you. Go back to my original one here. View native query or view data source query and view query plan. Right click. Database, value native query. I see everything here that I need. The select statement, the view native query. If I have to do anything additional, I can come out to this and just kind of figure out those bottlenecks.
You have a question from Ankita.
Yeah. Question.
Yeah, quick question. Might be related to this one, but feel free to disregard, if it's not related.
Oh,
but,
keep going.
Yeah, so in the Power Query which you're using inside the Power BI service, so is there a way we can share this with, for example, external client, but limit it so that they cannot make changes to what is already there, but they can build additional stuff or they can do whatever they want, something like
Not
that.
for external or B2B scenarios today. But I mean, if that's something that you're hearing, I mean, completely, I would say ideas.powerbi.com to kind of had that type of functionality extended. I hear it every so often, but I don't know the full use case and kind of how people would like to do that. Generally, though, I would think that people are kind of sourcing information in the context of like a data set. But if you're thinking or your scenario is more unique to, well, they would just want to structure data and kind of move it into another system, I would just I would love to learn from that scenario.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks.
Awesome. Oh, you're welcome. Cool. So new query plan. Oh, good.
One more question from Ali. He's asking if this could be considered a premium feature.
For what? For which item?
I guess the one that you just showed, the query plan.
No, all these are available just through the Power Query Online experience. No, premium or premium per user or any type of that licensing difference. And you'll see that as I kind of show some different applications and platforms. Everything that you're seeing in Power Query Online is extended to anywhere where Power Query is found. So let me then, I'll ignore that section. Let me take this information then, because I talk about my workflow. I talk about how I collaborate with people. So if I'm talking about flows, I should really be talking about Power Automate. So over here in Power Automate, if I do a new step, I type in Power Query, I have this transform data using Power Query. The current underlying source that this is supported for is Azure SQL Database. So if I was to click this, create query, what you're going to notice is that same interface that you just saw in Power BI is available over here. So I will do transform data on this table. Office 365 like icons, the folding indicators on the right-hand side, my navigator step, if I right-click, view query plan, view data source query, all that information is available through Power Query Online. There is no premium licensing component to it. Hopefully that's exciting news. So with this, I'll do a temp. We'll just say kind of number filters between, and we'll do between 250 and 300. Press OK. Holding step indicators, all of that still works. View data source query. View at the very bottom here, my where component, that range. If I was to do that awesome magical trick that I keep talking about, which is copy. If I was to go ahead and paste over here, missing credentials, I would have to set the relationship up, but all the underlying advanced editor M is supported from one application to another. I'll pause here though. How many people are currently using Power Query within the context of Power Automate for data transformation, maybe pushing it into another part of a workflow? Maybe it's an email body, etc. How many people are using Power Query within the context of Power Automate? Or is this your first time seeing it?
We've been waiting to get the on-prem stuff up into Azure SQL, and once this will be the other thing I'll be hopping up and down about, because this opens the door to especially the export as a service crap that one has to deal with now and again. So, so the export as a service type solutions, they just want it straight to Excel. Do this.
I agree. Well, we talked about Excel. It's where we started. So here in our workbook back in Excel, I have all my tables. If I look at this data tab, I have the queries. I remember my sales order header that we were just transforming some information, my customer address. If I was to right click this and do a refresh, it would refresh all of my Power Query queries up in Excel Online. Let me go ahead and press this button. Unfortunately, not today. Kills me. But what I think this shows you is that the Power Query Online experience, it's transferable. So I have to believe that at some point in time, if people want to do Power Query purely through a web-only experience, so outside of a Windows, outside of a Mac, maybe it's on a Raspberry Pi or a Linux box, at that point, they could come out to an Excel Online workbook, view these Power Query queries, which I can do today. I can see the query. I just can't right-click and I can't transform the data. I can't refresh it at the moment, but I have to believe that that is coming at some point in the future. But for today, me and my team, we work a lot in Teams. So here within my Teams application, if I go to Power Apps, I can do Start Now. Get out of here with that. There we go, build. So we can start building here at the top since I've already got something up and running. I'll do a new data flow here at the very top. Data flows preview. And whenever this is up and running, come on. I have to give the browser a refresher in a second. Quick refresh. So Power Apps in Teams, go to my build tab, data flows. Give me that button. Give me the button. And this will be cool whenever you see it. We see it. Fingers crossed. Don't embarrass me in front of my friends' teams. Come on. I know you've got an idea.
While we're waiting for the button, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, of course.
There was a magic right click and see functions list that I saw you do twice, but it went too fast, or my eyes are not good enough for this font size. What were you right clicking on to get that list of text dot end, text dot beginning, etc.
Text
So it
append.
was a list of M query references that you were
Shared.
getting in a set.
Yep. So if the new query, if you do hash shared,
Oh,
that's all you need.
okay.
I'll give you the shared function library here. And then another one, at least within Power BI Desktop, I'll kind of go back here, new query, blank query. This will be equals hash sections. This is another keyword. This will give you all of the queries that are currently within. Let me delete a few things here real quick because it's trying to combine these flat files. There we go. This will give you all the queries that are currently within your data set or Power Query experience. So if you want to do things like documentation of what all queries and tables are available within your data set, hash sections would be a kind of a recommendation there.
Sweet.
So, cool. So we'll see if Power Apps, I'm going to give it one more time. If not, I got to move on. We'll just move straight into Power Apps itself. Oh, of course it works now. Here within Teams, I can build a data flow. Blank query, come out here. I'm just going to pass this window. Of course, if I wanted to, I could copy and paste these queries, kind of taking it from Power BI. Let's see here if it works. Or if it's going to yell at me about authentication. Control V, figure, organizational, signed in. Oh, cool. All of the steps I did from Excel, moved into Power BI Desktop, moved into Power BI through the Power Query Online experience, transformed or took them over to Power Automate and moved them now into Microsoft Teams, where I can build data flows. Right click, view data source query, view query plan, all those same features and capabilities. I'll pause here. How many people are building data flows today inside of Microsoft Teams? Or is this the first time you're seeing this? It's crazy, right? Microsoft Teams, I can use Power Query Online. All these capabilities, view indicators, query plans, etc., all available in all these different experiences. So maybe
Actually,
if I was go ahead.
Fernando has a good question. He said, where's the query going to be stored when you create these data flows? Where do they go?
Yeah, so the queries will be stored in an assigned dataverse. So in this example, I know within Teams, they have like up to a certain limit of storage that is allowed to you. And if you would like, you can go ahead and attach your own Dataverse instance. And, sky is the limit at that point in terms of how much you'd like to bring in. But for me, when I think about this experience, maybe I'm a business unit that just has a spreadsheet. Maybe I'd like to build kind of a paginated report on top of these multiple spreadsheets. I don't have a database. My Azure team won't, spin one up for me, or my on-prem team won't kind of set aside some table storage for me. Over here, I could just load this data into a Dataverse table, start doing paginated reports, start doing some other experiences. Once again, I just think that this experience could be so cool over in Teams. And I'm always curious, like, has people seen it? How do I amplify this message more to talk more with Teams people about Power Query? But that's how I would view it. Landing in a Dataverse. From there, you can start taking advantage of kind of the query folding, paginated reports, and any other SQL-backed capability. Maybe you want to connect it to a SQL Server Management Studio. So Power Apps in Teams, I can build data flows over in Power Apps itself. Dataverse, I have data flows on the left-hand side. So I can now start creating data flows in Power Apps. I go up to my new data flow. Here, I've got two different options. I have one which is a standard data flow, which will take that information and will land it into that Dataverse table, or an analytical entity only. So this will load data and land it into an Azure data lake. So once again, this will just be assigned. You can attach your own if you'd like. Very similar to Power BI data flows, where today all the information is stored within a data lake behind the scenes. And at that point, you're just reading kind of those CSV files within the lake. But over here, let's do demo. You create sources and connect to these here. Once again, you already know my trick here. Just go into the blank query, get rid of it, copy and paste that same query we started out in Excel with. This is incredible. I'm just moving it from one system to the next. Paste, Control V, because it likes to yell at me. This will always laugh because I just still don't have the rhythm down. So ask me for credentials, of course. It's not basic. Get out of here. Let me try that one more time. Oh, there we go. Right-hand side, my query folding indicator, get onto my customers, view query plan, all of this same information in Power BI, in Power Automate, in Teams, in their capability of Power Query, all of this still available in the Power Query Online experience. How many people are using data flows today in Power Apps or the Dataverse here to load that information? Now pause there. Is this the first time that you realize that your skill set was transferable from Excel, from Power BI, from data flows, from Power Automate? I mean, we're on like application number 7 or 8 at this point. I'll pause there though. Is anyone using data flows today in Power Apps in the Dataverse?
Yes, I'm using data flows when you have the patience to wait for them to finish.
Authoring or refreshing? What are you thinking there? Great. Well, then let me close out of that. Obviously, my other favorite thing here is just to link data flows. So just because you build it in one system doesn't mean that it can't just be automatically read. So I'll do blah here. At the very bottom here, data flows. Any data flows that I've created in these other applications. So like Power BI Workspace, I can easily come out here to my workspaces. I built the transformation logic. All I want to do is simply just connect out to that table. It's that easy to move data from one system to the next. So my order detail, order header, click, click, reading it from one system and one application to the next. So no ETL here in this example if you don't need to. So as I talk about no ETL, Azure Synapse link over here on the left-hand side, this is where you can take all of this information and you can load it into a Synapse Analytics workspace. So in this example, everything that is being updated, everything that is being added to these Dataverse instances behind the scenes will be written to Azure Synapse automatically for you. So you don't have to set up any pipelines. You don't have to set up any of this information. No, I don't even want to call it no code. It is no ETL. Is anyone today using Synapse Link to move your information without any pipelines or orchestration events? I will pause there. Talking about Azure Synapse Analytics. This is the first time you've heard about Azure Synapse Link, because it's coming to more and more applications where you won't have to do ETL anymore. All right, think about it.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
AdventureWorks is a relatively small data set. What happens to these Power Queries and moving things around to all the different applications if you're working with something in the multi-terabyte range?
Multi-terabyte meaning that you're already loading data into maybe let's say like a Power BI data flow, and you now want to move it into like a Power Apps. That be accurate? Right. Or are you just saying the initial loading of that
taking
table?
Data and taking the results of your queries and stuff and
yeah,
and running them in all these different applications. But again, AdventureWorks is a relatively small data set. So I think in most businesses now, the data sets are relatively large. Are there performance issues? Are there, does it choke? I mean, you know,
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we would need a lot more of the details, but in this example where I'm simply just pointing to information that already exists out in the lake, I mean, it's just a file pointer. I don't have to load or ingest it into another system. So at that point, it could just be read-only activities that could be pretty fast. If you're saying, well, I need to take a file that exists over in the data lake within the Power BI workspaces here, right? So let me copy this. So this would be Power BI workspaces, and you need to load that information into like a Dataverse table or an Azure SQL. I don't know that Power Query would always beat out something like an Azure Data Factory, where it could do like multiple parallel processing. So that's where I would still be like, oh, it depends on the scenario. It depends on some of the activities that you're trying to do. But you know, as I'm talking about Azure Synapse Link, as I'm talking about Power Query, we have to move into, like you said, I want to do transformations. I want to do it through kind of a low code, maybe capability. So I will move into Azure Data Factory now. Left-hand side, Power Query. You can do a new Power Query. I'll just select my data set here, which would be my weather events. Awesome. Keep collapsing some things here if you don't mind. Collapse, Power Query, and I get that out of the way. I'll let this load here 1 second. The Office-like icons, the folding indicators we've been talking about, the point and click transformations here. So I'll do temp, I'll do number filters, I'll do a between 250, 300. Filtering my rows, right click, view data source query. Written the statement here for me, view query plan. This instance in this application of Power Query is running on top of a Spark cluster. So if you had a scenario where you want to do terabytes worth of information through a low to no code application like Power Query, absolutely. You could come out here and do that. Up at the very top though, currently not all Power Query M functions are supported. So if I was to come out here, do the learn more, it talks about what capabilities are, like row filtering, obviously like what we just did, some of the text dot contains, ends with, that we kind of did at the very beginning within Excel. They are adding things here all the time, so I'd always encourage you to check this out. But if you wanted to go after large scale information using Power Query, Azure Data Factory does have this flavor. Are you using the Power Query experience today in Azure Data Factory, if I was to ask that question back to you for some of those scenarios? Or is this the first time that you're seeing Power Query up in Azure Data Factory? Okay. Splitter.split text by character transition. Wish me luck here. I'm going to say anything that goes from an A to a lowercase z in a text list. I want to do capital A through capital Z. I want to do it for each item within this. And then at the very end, I want to do text.combine all this back into just kind of one statement there. So, of course, I always miss the spelling here. Column. Awesome. Freehand down. Splitter.split text by character transition. I have a list of values anywhere where a lowercase a dot through a list of values all the way up to a lowercase c transitions into a uppercase a through a dot list of values through z. So if you're not familiar with what that does, what that means, let me go ahead and duplicate this real quick. And then get out of here. I don't need all this. A dot z, just if you've never seen this before. Cool. So list of values A through Z. lowercase, uppercase, each item within my iteration, combining them here at the very end. If I was to right-click View Data Source Query, then it should alias here all of my names, I guess, because in this instance, they're lowercase. That's all right. Proper. There we go. So what I would say is things that are complex, at least here within the M code, there are still capabilities where it can execute. So there we go. Please try a simpler expression. Right-click View Data Source Query. I've capitalized everything just through that Power Query M language that we started talking about at the very beginning. Whew. I can do simple things in Azure Data Factory, and I can also do complex. So here, let me jump back into our presentation, and we're going to decompress. Design for everyone. At the very beginning of our hour, we started here with business analyst. We moved into kind of the solution developer through the Power Platform, and then of course at the very end into Azure being an integration specialist. All through this same interface of Power Query. And obviously it looked a little bit different in the online components, but we took our queries, moved them from one application to another. My guidance here to anyone, if you want your solution to be a hit, just make sure it works in Excel. So I would love this timeline. I quit updating it some time ago. As you can see, it's just because Power Query is everywhere these days. I just can't keep up. Started back in 2007 as Project Oslo, moved into Azure SQL Labs, introduced as an Excel add-in in kind of 2013. And then this arrow here that I always like to call when our community found out. So at that point, they said, oh my gosh, this thing is incredible. We want this everywhere. Move this into Excel natively as soon as possible. We don't want this to be an add-in. At that point, it just was a rocket. At the same rate, it could have been an application where nobody used it, nobody loved it, and they said, kill it, deprecate it, nobody wants it. That would have broken my heart. Because right now, Power Query found in Excel, Power BI, Azure Analysis Services has Power Query, Power Apps, Power Automate, data flows, and all of the different flavors. So in Power BI, in Teams, in Power Apps, SQL Server Integration Services, if you want to do Power Query over there, Data Factory, Excel to Mac, Customer Insights to Dynamics, so many other places I can't even keep up. It's everywhere. Just make sure it works with your Excel users. Always my advice. And where would I like to see the future of this technology going? I think there'll be people that are highly specialized in Power Query in the M language that are out building custom connectors. That's just, at some point I'll look out on LinkedIn and they'll be, I'm looking to hire an MDBA. It won't always be a SQL DBA. They'll be looking for some type of very, very niche developer here with the M language. IntelliSense is already done. You can use it in terms of all those functions. I know it is broken in some applications, but it's just kind of the work in progress there to get it fixed. Seamless integration, as you saw, the UI looked the same as we were jumping from one thing to the next. It was awesome. All of the skill set that I'm building today, all transferable. Done or in progress here in terms of those pro developers who want to do something at large scale. Keep checking in. If something is broken for you today, maybe within the Data Factory kind of a component of Power Query, check back. They've just been doing tremendous work there. I always like to laugh here, Microsoft Access, why not? You know, the on-prem database, why not? You know, I would love to see Power Query over there. Excel for Mac done or in continuous progress there. Excel Online, we've seen that we can source the queries. When can I start expecting Power Query Online to show up there? That would be the question I'm looking for. That's the hashtag I'm trying to follow. Then on Twitter, I just want to know when that's going to be released. Version control, we do understand that there's the underlying language with all these point and clicks. I would love to be able to start storing those out on GitHub, kind of sharing those with people. And then at the very end of the day, why is Power Query just not a standalone product where I can pull up Power Query and then I can choose where I want to deploy it? Take this solution, deploy it into Power Apps. Take this solution, deploy it into Power BI. Take this and deploy, as opposed to having to jump through the different applications. I just think that it'd be so cool to have a powerquery.exe file installed on my desktop. But with that, I know we've kind of gone through just a blazing pace here of all of the different places where Power Query is found. If you have any questions, suggestions, or if you just downright think that I am crazy for Power Query, now is the time. Feel free to come off mute, ask any questions. So with that, let me go ahead. I will stop sharing my screen just so I can see everyone's face. Awesome. Power Query. Whew.
Whew. So much power.
I'm telling you, it's showing up everywhere.
Right?
It truly is the power of the platform for me. Where was that question? In Azure Data Factory, why would you use Power Query instead of data flows? Yeah, and two separate different things there. So Power Query used to be called wrangling data flows up in Azure Data Factory. And then there was another component which was data flows, so data space flows. Because it was confusing and because Power BI also was using the term data flows, they switched it. So now up in Data Factory, there are two different things. One will be data flows, which I believe is run through, is it Scala is the underlying language, or I know it has its own formula language up there too, but that is not the Power Query experience. I would suggest if you're doing something of high scale, I would probably say go for the data flows right now and not the Power Query in Data Factory. But if you're doing something like simple transformations like the filtering of rows, and you want to kind of have that component be part of your pipeline, try Power Query. I know a lot of people who are having success with it, but I would say the more robust and mature may be the data flows component. Hopefully that answered the question, or feel free to come off mute and feel free to expand if you need.
Yes, that answered the question. Thank you.
Awesome, Polly. Thanks for trying. Thanks for trying if you have out in Data Factory too.
Building on that question, Alex, so you were saying that Power Query in Azure Data Factory is only connecting to Azure SQL right now? Did I hear that right? As in, you wouldn't use it to, oh, I have a flat file sitting in this blob storage, and it'd be really nice to just process said flat file with the ease of Power Query. Can we do that in Azure Data Factory now or not yet?
Not yet. Yeah, so it still supports very limited sources. And then at the very end, it has to support folding too. So that's where things kind of fall apart. Yep.
I get you. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
But keep an eye on it though. Like I said, I see the improvements even just a few years ago. I was like, I'm never touching this thing. But today I'm like, this is getting pretty sharp out here. And I think the Power Query Online experience and all those diagnostics and plans, like, all right, I'm willing to take an actual look these days.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, once you can start processing flat files, that means that when ERP systems are just dropping flat files somewhere, all of a sudden that initial staging process, cleanup process, so much.
Go ahead.
So
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
where is the limitation on the sources? I mean, you said that Power Query within Data Factory can only use what? And is that a limitation everywhere with Power Query, or what is the source limitation?
No, so hold on. So you can pull up kind of the different sources and let me do. I'll get my screen shared here again. 1 second.
While you're pulling that up, you could always dump your flat files into Excel and then use Power Query on them.
Yeah, and honestly, they could have supported flat files these days if I was to go back look through the documentation. So in the past, it would tell me it would not move forward. Because right here, I'm connecting out to an Azure SQL CSV out in the lake. So I'll return new Power Query. Here we go. So not SQL. I'll just do a CSV file. There we go. There we go. And then I'll do, let's just do a false equals true. In the past, it wouldn't let me move forward with the broken folding. It could today. That could be one improvement that they've made. I can take a quick look at the documentation and confirm for you. But in the past, it would say, unfortunately, that this step would not be able to be supported. I'll let you know. I'll let you know, though. What else? What other questions?
There is a question from
I have
Anita.
question on optimization part of the Power Query. So is there anything you recommend, like a video series or a blog that we can follow to do a step-by-step optimization? Because sometimes the refresh works on the desktop, but when it goes to the Power BI service, it has more problems, it's taking more longer.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about refreshes, there could be components like the gateway that come into effect. So is it gateway undersized? If it's more of just we're doing a lot of transformations, maybe on top of like Excel files or flat files, a lot of that could just be getting stuck in kind of the mashup engine, where it's just going to continue to kind of churn and churn and churn. But what data source are you using today?
It is the on-prem SQL Server. That's what we're using, but the data set size becomes more than 1 GB, which is, I don't know if that is a problem, but I'm talking about simply the data flow right now, just to get the data from the SQL database into the Power Query, and it is kind of breaking in my Power BI service. So
And this would be for a data flow.
Data flow, yes.
It could be the transformations. I would say, are you using like enhanced compute engine? If you're kind of using premium or premium per user, hit me up after the event, and I'd be happy to kind of nerd out a little bit on some optimizations. But I will drop a resource. There was an excellent one that was just done by Chris Webb, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then for the people that are asking kind of about where can I learn M, I'm dropping Ben Gribaldo's series. Benji, he has an incredible series that he's been writing for, it feels like multiple years at this time, but that's where I would suggest starting there. Okay. What else? Other questions?
There is a question from Ankita. She's asking if you could do build a data warehouse, data mart using Power Query.
Building a data warehouse. What are we thinking there?
In example, store structured tables at one place and pull it later on as required by department folks.
Yeah, so basically if your company or someone doesn't have a proper database or even a data warehouse or data lake, and you're just using Power BI to pull data from basic sources, like Excel, Smartsheets, or Excel file, can you store it in a structured way using Power Query, because that will save a lot of time and money in terms of spending those money for the special database administrator or something like that. Can we build that using this in Azure or anywhere else, like Data Factory or anywhere? I know you showed us like we can do that, but I don't know whether we can store it.
Yep. So this is where I would I'm kind of getting out here. That Dataverse for Teams environment that kind of comes with your licensing, that's where I would be like, well, what's the size of the data mart? How big does it need to be? If it's just simple spreadsheets, like I would start looking there, especially if you already have an assigned storage limit. Like, my goodness, start filling up those tables, and then you can take advantage of, writing SQL on top of the Dataverse. Dataverse is essentially just backed by Azure SQL. Go ahead, though. That's where I would look.
I was saying just thank you. That's a good start, and I guess I might look into Dataverse for sure. It's a good idea to store at least somewhere, instead of just using those files and just gathering it in Power BI.
Awesome. Well, start tagging me if you find success. I would love to nerd out with more people doing Power Query in Teams. I think it'd be so cool.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
What else?
You have another question. I often use SAS tabular before connecting to Power BI. So do I do little Power Query? Can I stop using SAS tabular for Power Query?
Tab before connecting. So I do a little Power Query. Can I stop? I'm assuming it would be a live connection. I don't think you'd be doing any Power Query in this situation, unless you're trying to extract data out of that cube. There's kind of that anti-pattern where we'd be like, no, don't do that. But I'd love to learn a little bit more about that scenario if you want to come off mute. Going once, going twice. What else? Blazing experience, seeing Power Query in so many different places. This is a learn once skill set that can apply to, I think, upwards of a dozen applications. If I think about my time and where I want to spend my learning, if 80% of data is collecting it and transforming and cleaning it and getting it prepared for a system, my goodness, you have 80% of the skill set in 12 different Microsoft products. How incredible is that? That's how I always want you to leave when you're thinking about, should I invest my time kind of learning Power Query or learning some of these different things? Absolutely, that skill set is so transferable. Awesome, thank you. So I'll pass the torch back to you, but thank you so much for inviting me in.